Welcome to the second knowledge session, Knowledge Cafe on title Partnering for Success. I'm going to spend a few minutes just laying the context for our session before we have a good discussion here between the panel and I, and then we'll leave the last 15 minutes for some old-fashioned Q&A where we'll invite questions from everyone here. If you could just raise your hands and we'll move the questions around. So the backdrop really is that India has over 3.3 million registered nonprofits, and identifying ones to support is difficult. It's not actually an easy task, and successful grant making, in fact, is difficult. How to select, whom to select, where to select from, how do you measure success in grant making are all critical questions that need to be answered. They need to be answered now more than ever because we have a potentially larger sum of money that's going to flow into the development sector, into the social sector every year than ever before. So how do we go about answering these questions? And what can we learn from those who are doing a really good job at it? Fortunately for us, we have here today three individuals representing reputed large foundations that carry out their grant making very strategically and are generating enormous impact. Just to put a few numbers out there, over the past 10 to 15 years, three of these foundations together have disbursed over 2,000 crores towards the development sector. And this disbursement of funds has actually gone to over 800 nonprofit organizations. So we're talking about fairly large numbers, and there's a lot to learn from them today, and that's really our job to get the best out of them. In keeping with the spirit of the Knowledge Cafes, we're going to keep this session conversational. It's all about sharing insights and how-tos for many of the corporates in the room today who are looking to make their grant making more impactful. So I have a couple of general questions that I'd like each of my panelists to answer, and then some specific questions for each of you, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So just to kick it off, a simple question around, how do you decide where to actually invest your funds? And if we could have Mr. Babu Joseph start, and we can move the question in that order.
Before you decide where to invest, you have to first decide which is the sector you would like to focus. For our organization, for the first 5 years, we focused on education. And around 2011, we had a fresh look at our areas of focus. And we decided that we will now focus on providing sustainable livelihoods. And once we decided that this is our focus, then we started doing our studies to find who are the good players in the sector, who are the good organizations that could help us. And our foundation as a strategy had decided that we will work only with NGOs. So identifying the right NGO, working with them, together preparing a project, deciding on the impact that we would want to achieve, deciding on the partners who would help us to achieve this impact, and then rolling out the program.
Thank you. Purnima, SDTT is, of course, the stalwart in the room, and you'll have been doing this for the past 75 years. So tell us a little bit about your experience with it, and how have you all come around to the decision of where you'll want to put your large amounts of money and which organizations you'll decide to do it with.
So it's been a fairly long and interesting journey for the trusts, and I'll just touch upon it a little bit and come to where we are today. So what started was at a point in time where the NGO sector in the country was not so well developed and vibrant as it is today. And at that point of time, the approach had been one of identifying a good idea or an individual, who's coming on board about something interesting to do in the development sector, and then you back that person all the way. And that had been pretty much the, modus operandi of the trusts. So yes, our approach has been primarily to fund NGOs. Institutional funding or setting up institutions has been the other thing which we've been actively doing. Two guiding principles, I think, which the trusts have had is, one is building up the best. So how do you, create excellence? How do you build that? And secondly, but it's not second in order, it's the other part of it, is inclusion. So looking at building up the best and looking at inclusion. Bulk of our focus over a period of time has been on inclusion, but these are the two pegs on which the foundation is built. Uh, so from an earlier approach where it was someone coming to you with a great idea, you back it up all the way, and then you look at what change has got created, that has evolved over a period of time. This is not to say that one approach is better than the other, but yeah, that was, I think, VC funding at its angel best in those days. But over a period of time, the NGO sector has also evolved. There are a lot of players. Sectors and themes have got more clearly defined. And how the trusts have also evolved through this has been identifying specific sectors or themes, as Babu Joseph was also talking about. So now we have 6 core themes. And being a fairly large foundation, we have thought it important to be in these 6 areas, which is rural livelihoods, urban livelihoods, health, media, art and culture, education, and civil society. So these are very broad and they cover a very large spectrum. But what we do is within each of these 6, we have very specified focus areas. So we have a strategic planning exercise, which happens once every 5 or 6 years, to relook at these themes, to relook at the sub-themes within each of these areas. And what we also try to do as a strategy now is to look at model building. So within each of the themes we've identified are there models which are kind of developing? Can we look at partners working together to take those models ahead? And then could we look at the government, or could we look at other players who may want to take it to scale? So it's not necessarily that we do everything or we pitch in at every point, but looking at model building and looking at scale is something which we have kind of zeroed in on.
Absolutely, and great. And you brought up the interesting point of partnerships, and that's something that we're going to focus on a little bit more, and that's actually the title for our session as well. But before we get to that, Deepa, if we can have you add MacArthur's experience, and both Babu Joseph and Purnima have spoken about the starting point being deciding which sector you want to actually play in, but and then everything actually channels and flows through after that. But how do you even go about deciding which sector, what's important? Share with us the MacArthur experience.
So the MacArthur Foundation operates in almost, I think, 40 to 50 countries, but we have offices in 4 countries, and India is one of them. And it was in the early 90s that the foundation dates back to 1978, and initially our work was only in the Chicago area. But in making the decision to invest in India, I think we had an advisory group that went around and talked to a lot of experts, and we decided that, because we are a global organization, we wanted to make change not only in the country, but also globally. So investing in which country would have the maximum impact? So for us, for instance, we decided our first investments would be in women's health. And the indicators on women's health in various ways are really poor in India. For example, maternal mortality, even with all the improved indicators, today about 1/5 of maternal deaths happens in India. So the idea was that, or the number of girls getting married before 18. So the idea was that if you moved or improved things within India, the chances were that you were going to make improvements globally. Was one of the considerations that made us get into India, and then in the sector of population and reproductive health, where our initial investments were, in which case we've invested in 2 themes. One is reducing maternal mortality and morbidity, and the second one is youth sexual reproductive health, in which our adolescent portfolio fits in. And more recently, we've started to invest in girls' secondary education, because that's where we see a huge gap, and the linkage between education and health is really, it's kind of a longer continuum.
Thanks for that. I want to go into that a little bit, just to connect it with our theme, right? Because girl power, empowering adolescent girls, is a lot of what is a theme for us for Dasra. It's a key area of focus that we will be looking into over a longer term period, and especially over the next 5 years. And you mentioned the start being wanting to create impact at a global scale, right? At a global level, and then thinking of issues that can give you all a platform to have impact at that level. So, and you brought up the point about that's where our adolescent girl portfolio actually fits in, but connect those pieces for us. If you want to make impact at a fundamental level that's really global, that's affecting a very large number of people, how does empowering adolescent girls actually fit into that?
I mean, I think your data is posted around the room, so I don't have to spell out the connections between improving intergenerational changes, whether it's in poverty alleviation or more literate individuals within the country, better health outcomes, et cetera, between all of those things and improving the lot of adolescents, girls in particular. And I will just say one thing. I think, frankly, in India, we've done work around Dalit empowerment. Not that there's not enough left to be done, but we have kind of started to dabble with stuff around disability, work around disability, et cetera. But I think the big unsaid or the last battle is really the battle around women's rights. And I think we are in a position that I think we are kind of disinterested yet interested. I know that we don't have corporate interests to bear in mind, so sometimes we can support grants that are a little bit where our organizations can be opposed to what is the mainstream thinking around this. But we also work very closely in collaboration with state and national governments. So we support a range of initiatives that can range from service delivery to building policy to doing measurements and kind of doing some of the global work, advocacy that needs to get done. We are in that position which may, CSR initiatives may or may not be able to occupy that we can occupy that kind of space. So.
Sure. And so just now, moving, so we've spoken a little bit about how within sectors, perhaps even the kinds of interventions that you want to support is important and can be the starting point. We then, obviously need to move towards actually selecting organizations, because that's really largely for all of us here, the vehicle through which we're creating impact on the ground. Is through supporting organizations that then implement programs. And the question for you, Babu Joseph, is around, Axis Bank Foundation was set up in 2006, at a time when the bank set apart 1% of its profit annually to put towards the foundation, which would then do grant making. And you'll have grown that very substantially from 7 NGO grantees to around 100 today, over a short period of about 7 to 8 years. And before we get around to selecting organizations, and that isn't easy, and we'll tease that out a little bit, how do people go about that? But I thought it might be interesting for the room to actually learn a little bit about how do you organize yourself as a foundation, as an entity, as an organization, to make this possible, to grow, to have grants, to monitor those grants. So what are the sort of the systems and processes of organization building that you need to do before you'll actually go into it?
Okay, so in 2006, we decided to give a strategic focus to corporate social responsibility. So first, we set up a foundation as a public trust. We decided that we will set aside 1% of our profit to the foundation every year. This is the maximum that the Reserve Bank today permits banks to do. And we decided that we will have a very eminent board to run the foundation. So we have got 3 external board members. Mr. Ramadurai of TCS is the chairman of our board. Anu Agha of Thermax and Sheila Patel of Spark. They are the people who sit on our board. Then we have the senior most director of the bank sitting on the board. And I'm the executive trustee. I've been with the bank for the last 19 years. I'm an out-and-out banker. So last 3 years, I've been with the foundation. So the bank has given us the broad idea. First, they said, let's work in the field of education. Then, around 2011, we realized that the Indian growth story is not inclusive. So we should look at providing sustainable livelihoods to poor people. We decided to work in some of the most backward regions of the country and bring people out of poverty. We decided to set a goal for ourselves that by 2017, we should bring 1 million people out of poverty. Out of that, at least 60% of the beneficiaries should be women. and we should bring about a substantial increase in their income. So the big focus was on income. If there is greater income, there is food security, there is no need for migration. If there is permanence, then you can send your children to school and talk of health and sanitation. But we are very focused on identifying the right partner. So the maximum stress is on identifying the right partner. So we do all our due diligence, we talk to other foundations, we talk to the Tata Trust, we talk to as many people as possible to identify the right partner. Then we go see their work, decide on how good they are. So it need not be a big organization. It could be a relatively small organization, but with all the beautiful setup to scale. So together we sit with them and draw out a plan. So now we have learned that partners require long-term support. Initially we were supporting them for say a year at the most, then reviewing, giving them one more year's support. But it became very clear that partners require long-term support. So now all our programs are 5-year programs. So we set a target for 5 years so we can really look big time, reaching out to 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 families. And we clearly decide that we have to do a baseline of every single of our beneficiaries, and we should aim for at least a 60 or 70% increase in their income. Once the proposal is filled up, it goes to the Axis Bank Foundation board for approval. Every single grant requires the approval of the board. Thereafter, the bank has got no say in deciding where to give and how much to give. So we have an independent board, an eminent board. They can decide what to give. So that has helped us in choosing the right partner, approving the best of proposals. And once the proposal is approved, we clearly lay down what is it that we have to do. There is a memorandum of understanding that we enter into, and the 5-year target is broken into year-wise target. And the year-wise target is broken into monthly targets. So we monitor the progress of the program every single month. And the grant, we release only 3 months grant at a stretch, go to the field, monitor the utilization, and then release the rest of the grant. At the end of 1 year, we get a sector specialist to go and do an audit of the work. After 2 years, we do a sector specialist to do an impact assessment of the work. At the end of every year, the proposal is taken to the board for review. We see how the organization has performed vis-a-vis the target and decide whether any course correction is required. So a lot of planning, and this learning has come over the years. We have made our fair share of mistakes, let me tell you. But today, the corporates can learn, and from day one, you can do the right things. So clearly identifying the good organization, treating them as your long-term partner, clearly deciding on the roadmap, and continuous monitoring of the performance is the road for success.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think, the word partnership has come up several times already, and clearly, Babu Joseph, from what you've said, through this rigorous process of diligence that you have, there is a large amount of knowledge that you have on the partners, right? So these are your grantees, you look at them as partners, and you really learn a lot about them. And, in some ways, this is a best practice, right? And runs counter to the unfortunate stereotype that we hear many a time where, the funding relationship between a donor, in many cases, it could be a corporate, and an NGO, there's very little communication back and forth. There's very little attempt made to actually understand what each other do. So, the funder doesn't really know what the NGO's program is about. The NGO on the other end of the spectrum doesn't really understand what areas the corporates want to fund, how does that align with their business interests, and how can they actually get more funding from the organization by having more conversations. So with partnerships as that theme, right, in actually building those bridges between the funders, the grantors, and the grantees, if I could ask Purnima, who has, SDTT clearly has a lot of experience in this as well and adopts more of a partnership model and has best practices in that. So if you could just share with us, what does partnering with an NGO or partnering with a group of NGOs actually mean to you? And and if at all, has it helped you all be better grant makers?
So I think that and I'll tie it up a little bit with the selection part because I think both of these things are closely related. if there is a specific theme or an area in which, we have, the trust has thought that yes, grant making or designing programs is worthwhile, there looking at two things is very critical from a partnership perspective. One is geography, two is thematic expertise. So if there is a specific geography or a specific theme on which work is required, at least if it's great if one is able to find a partner or an organization which has both competencies of working in that geography as well as the thematic, the subject matter expertise, because actually that really rests with the partners who are based there. The geographic know-how of the location of the space is really with them. So these two factors, if we are able to find within the same organization, that's great. But at times, one may not find both within the same organization. So there, at least if one peg is really very strong and the other one can be developed over a period of time, that is something which we try and do. What I would not say we've been successful in this kind of mode with all of our partners, but increasingly what we've tried to identify is, say, within a specific theme, there's a certain way in which we want to plan our programming. So, for example, one of the themes we've identified is on migration. So within migration, there is this concept of having migrant resource centers. So for all geographies where there is heavy out migration, getting partners into this idea of, do you think a migrant resource center would make sense to you? And then having cross-learning, cross-visits in locations where this is being tried out, getting them to do a slow pilot in their own location, provided it makes sense to them in their geography. And then having joint workshops or joint learning sessions in terms of, having one unit. So one interesting thing which I think has worked for us is either we set up our own capacity building team which works with these organizations, or within one of the organizations which has the technical expertise, setting up a team. So within our migration program, Ajivika Bureau is one of our partners. So there we have set up a Center for Migration and Labor Solutions, which actually provides technical support to each of the partners in the program. So if, one can identify resource organizations within the NGOs itself and those who have good capacity, there can be very strong linkages which can be formed. Then you have, 3 monthly reviews, 3 monthly cross-learning or sharing workshops. Then you have it, you can have it in a very systematic way where partners are actually learning from each other. You have structured things within the budget where they will go to exposure visits to, other organizations. So each of these things, if it can be planned from the design phase, in certain themes or certain contexts, it's possible to do it. So without adopting a one-size-fits-all approach, which is the danger of being on the other extreme, if there is enough space for, regional and geographic specificity, some of these kind of ways can actually help partners come together and learn from each other. Yeah. And we learn a lot in the process while partnering with them.
Absolutely. And so when you start about, talking about partnerships and bringing, your grantees together around specific issues or sectors that might be playing in, you've already actually started going beyond just financial support, right? And you're going into the area of non-financial support and capacity building support. And just on that, Deepa, since MacArthur has actually, gone well beyond that and has done work in ecosystem building and actually bringing all kinds of stakeholders to the table around specific issues, both in India and abroad. So if you could, just keeping with that partnership theme, share with us what MacArthur's experience has been and what's made that possible and the benefits of it.
I think when we build our own strategy, we have partnership and leverage and scale as really important elements within it. So we know, I think we are humble in recognizing that our contributions are going to be very limited. So the question is how best what can we do to really impact the field? And within that, we find partnerships and collaborations to be extremely important. So some of the things that we do are, yes, we work with grantees on offering specific support on M&E, on specific technical issues, on exposure trips, perhaps on scaling up. We've actually made grants that are not related to the sector, but actually on technical themes as well. But we also, what we try to do is we try to reach out. We try to build, partnerships with other donors who are already in the field or are interested in working with the field. And there are groups here that we have worked with quite intensively, or at least have had conversations with folks. Because the important thing for us is really how do you impact the field? We are not here to our funding is very limited, so we can't really be doing service delivery. And I know the Tata Trust does a fair amount of that because you bring much more money and all of that. We don't do that. So our connections are between, what we do is build connections between grantees, build connections between donors who are also interested in the field, build connections, partnerships between our grantees and other donors. And many of them have actually benefited from support from other donors. We may come in with a little bit support on one side of their project, and someone else may chip in with the other. The other thing, as a global foundation, what we do is also connect our grantees to some of the global work that's going on. So some of our grantees are sitting in committees that the Secretary General, for example, has set up on education, on maternal health, etc. So I think our partnerships, the way we define partnership, kind of bridges all those different sectors.
Great. We're going to move into sort of Q&A. I think we have about 10 or 15 minutes, 10 minutes for the panel. But before we do that, just to come back, question for each of you, something a little bit more targeted, a little bit of a how-to. So when you are, so let's say, we've selected a sector here, we know what the subsector of interest is, the kinds of interventions we perhaps want to support, and you get into the diligence process. What are one of the key things, one or two of the most key things that you'll look for when you're making a decision on funding an organization? So we could start with Babu Joseph and then move around.
First of all, as I told you, our focus is now in providing sustainable livelihoods. So agriculture is one of the most important areas that we work in. Then skill building and working with artisans and craftsmen. We look for organizations that work in these areas. We look at organizations that have a good track record. They have been doing this for some time. There is a great amount of transparency in the way they do their working. They have a capability to document the work and a capability to scale up. Significant scale up in what they are doing. So it's not enough if they are able to do things. With our support, can they grow from, say, reaching out to, say, around 1,000 people to, say, several times that number? And the capability to properly document what they are doing and give us regular reports of what they are doing. These are some of the things that we look in the organization. Then what is very important is who is running the show. That is perhaps most critical. Who are the people who are advising them? What is their advisor board, the trustees on their board? How good is their team? How good are their capabilities? So these are some of the things that we look at when we decide on a partner.
Thank you. Purnima, would you like
Yeah,
to add
so
to that?
if I were to use words which the audience would be able to immediately connect with, I think organizational or leadership due diligence, financial due diligence, and technical due diligence. I think these are the three very key pegs that we are at least looking at when we are supporting organizations. One thing, critical thing which we try to not do is not to overfund them, because often sometimes what we've seen on the ground is that very good organizations sometimes are not able to handle too much money which is coming in, and sometimes, so that is something which we try to calibrate, though we may think that yes, let's, go big, we try to calibrate that and not do that unless there is an organizational capacity building piece which is going side by side to help organizations handle, that kind of scale or that kind of growth, though that is something which we are very keen and aggressive about. So there are times where we have really wanted the organization to go ahead and do more, but after some time we realize that no, probably, we should not push them into a position where the organization will not be able to handle it, because we've seen some organizations go through that kind of a cycle as well. So we do try to calibrate that. And most importantly, yes, how much is the shared buy-in into the idea or the program that we are trying to develop together? So it may mean a lot of, to and fro and discussion and planning into, what is it that we're going to do together. But we do see value in investing time in that exercise. Sometimes it's frustrating for people on both ends to go through that rigor. But I think what we are able to get at the end of it is something which then both parties can be very proud about. And then if you've designed something with that kind of rigor, you can also look at, having built something which was different, which you can take at a policy level, which, you can then showcase as something which is path-breaking. And with some of our partners, I think we've had that kind of an experience.
Thank you. Great.
I think, yeah, I agree with both Babu, Joseph, and Purnima. I think for us, because we are very leanly structured, and maybe some of the new CSR initiatives may also be, just have 3 or 4 people within it, within the organization. I think we kind of piggyback on, what other donors have done with that organization. So for example, if Tata Trust has supported them, or some, perhaps some other reputed donor, we know that they've undergone a certain amount of due diligence already. So we perhaps don't have to repeat all of that. But we have our own, I think in addition to everything else, I think we definitely, with the starting point is really professionalism and technical competency in that particular area. But we also look for, you want to make a kind of a change in society. So does that organization mirror that kind of, does it have an inner democracy as well? So you want, for example, to promote social inclusion, all of that. So does that organization share those values? So those are kind of, those you don't have metrics perhaps, because you don't want to be, you don't necessarily want to be asking for diversity and all of that. But I think there is, in that conversation that you have leading up to the point where a grant gets approved, you're going to have these very long discussions which may be tedious on both sides. I think we all get very tired, because to bring a grant to fruition takes sometimes as many as 9 months, 1 year. So I think that entire process is a learning for both parties to get to know about each other and kind of influence the way both think. I mean, not only the grantee, but even the donor may undergo, may go learn something in that process of making a grant.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think what's pretty clear, both from, in hearing the different steps of the process, the kind of terminology, language that you all are using, is that, it's serious business, right? And it's selecting organizations is rigorous, right? And that's when you do good grant making well, is when you invest into the process. I think a lot of what you all have said mirrors what Dasra does. In each of the sectors that we do research on, we spend 6 to 9 months evaluating over 200 to 300 organizations before we come up to the list of sort of one, or, to the list of 3 to 4 that we create these scaling plans with, and finally select one for funding. So it isn't a light decision by any means, but it's only when you do it in that manner that you actually see the impact being reflected. So I think with that, we'll open it up to Q&A to the larger audience, and move some of the questions around. So we have a few hands up there. I think the gentleman who raised his hand first. Yeah.
Hi, myself, I am Sudhakar. I head Rural Livelihoods Division in Dr. Reddy's Foundation. My specific question goes to Babu as well as Purnima. From your experience, government is the largest holder of monies in the country. May it be Rural Livelihoods Mission, or it be NREGA, or any health mission or urban mission. There are almost 12 to 13 missions operating in India. From your experience, do you have a model where your money has impacted more livelihoods? Your monies, in the sense like, Access Foundation monies, or Tata Trust money has impacted. Due to your money, could you able to help NGOs in mobilizing more monies from government? That's the question. For example, this is the question. I would also like to take a minute to share some of the experiences. We partner with ENY. We partner with Sampark Foundation in implementing rural livelihoods adoptions, methodology and technology adoptions at the farmer level. So what we started actually doing is, from Dr. Reddy's Foundation, we started giving a matchmaking. We started spending, as part money. ENY and other foundations started putting some more money. By that way, we started partnering with some of the local NGOs, and then government money will also be, for all the program-related things, government will put their monies. So our money will be used for most of the operational, meeting the staff costs and capacity building costs. So that way, probably when we're talking about partnering for success, I understand that partnering for impacting. Instead of success, if we can look at partnering for impacting, maybe together we can bring more impact. Maybe I shared some of my experiences. I also request you to respond on this particular
Did you get the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fairly. So as for Axis Bank Foundation, partnering with the government is of absolute importance. Everywhere we try to see that we can get hold of government resources wherever possible. Because I told you we work extensively in the field of agriculture. So in about 10 of our programs, we are already partnering with the government. So what we use, our funds are for building up the teams in the NGO, and they preparing a detailed program. And out of that, we say this much should come from the Tribal Welfare Department or the Irrigation Department or through the MG Narega funds. So we have allocated in the program specific amounts that have to flow in from various governments. It's really challenging working with them. Our experiences in different states have been different. Some states it has been very good, some states it has been not so good. But for us, we have realized that working with government is critical. And it's not only in agriculture, in skill building also. We are partnering with government. Some portion of the money is coming from the government. There also success has been different in different states. So it depends very much on one bureaucrat here or one government official there. But as a policy, we have realized that it is of paramount importance that we work with the government and try to get as much of the funding that we can from them and ensure that government funds are being properly utilized for creating credible infrastructure in most places. And we provide sort of the working capital to see that things happen. Fatima, you can share.
Yeah, sure. If you'd like to respond.
I think,
I
I think we all have to acknowledge that in India, at least, government, the state offers really good, potential for affecting the lives of the marginalized. I think all our funding put together would never even add up to what the government can do. So for us, actually, when we even approve projects, we really look at how does it work with what is in that ecosystem, as far as what the government can offer. What is it that our projects can do to either make that functioning better, the state function better, or even sometimes provide technical assistance to governments, state governments, because there are actually very few people within government departments that can do effective implementation. So some of our grants work directly with particular ministries, whether it's education or health, to help them implement the projects more effectively on the ground. And you'll be surprised, because I think the nature of state and government has also changed in India in the last 10 years or so. I think governments are much more open to civil society than they were, and you'd be surprised. It is a challenge, no doubt about it, but it's the elephant in the room, and they have great potential to do good. So I think we must be factoring in the state and the government while we do our while we even fashion our projects.
Just to go into that a little bit more and have your comment on it. I mean, clearly, if we're trying to create the issues we're dealing with are clearly at scale, right? These are large issues, and so the solutions and the impact needs to be generated at scale as well. And in getting anywhere close to scale, working with the government is absolutely critical. But Deepa, you mentioned that that's a criteria that you'll almost use in selecting the organization. So how do you actually gauge if an organization knows what to do as far as the government is concerned, or actually engages with the government in a strategic manner? How do you gauge that?
I think the NGOs we support are fairly small. So it's not like they don't all have 40-year-old histories, and their staff doesn't run into several hundred. I think what we do is really figure out firstly, they have to be professional and technically competent. You have to be very mature if you have to be working with the government. So what is their special strength? Do they bring in, for example, are they very strong on research? And I will give you an example from a group which many of you may know of. It's called Search they work in Gadchiroli in Maharashtra. And we have been supporting them for a very long time on their work on neonatal mortality. And they found for example, using health workers to work with families when they bring the babies home had great impact in reducing infant neonatal mortality. Now, the general trend was, if the baby falls sick, rush the baby to the hospital. Now, that's not possible in most villages. But it took them a long process through which they were able to test their model of saving newborn lives in the villages. Then they tested it in a larger number of NGOs. Then the government got interested and they got ICMR funding to test it in many states. Finally, the Planning Commission said, this is a good practice and it should be adopted across the country. So what has happened is now home-based neonatal care is part of the government's program. And the government has allocated God knows how much resources for that strategy. So that is how you build out that scale, and that's where your judgment should come in from the very beginning. What is it that this particular NGO can do to move it from here to there? So part of our due diligence process also looks at, what is the mission and the vision of that NGO? If it is so very happy working in 10 villages, perhaps we are not the right donor for it. So there has to be that fit as well between what that NGO can offer and what how can we help that NGO move that along.
Yeah, so. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Purnima, would you like to add to that at all? Or?
Yeah, I would like to say one is that this question of whether we are partnering for success or impact, I don't think if you're not creating an impact, you're not successful. So I think that's, there's no difference between the two in my mind. And whatever, as you're saying, whatever we are doing, even though the trust may be a large player, whatever we do in isolation or together, we are really a drop in the ocean. So but the point is that do we make it a prerequisite that will our partner be able to actively work with government or not? Do we make it a prerequisite in all cases? We do not, because we see two ways in which this can happen. One is where we work with the partner to arrive at a particular model, which can then be taken to scale or then be taken to the government. So even though they may not be working very actively with them today, tomorrow this is an idea which can, so that is one way of looking at it. The second thing is definitely organize. So we do look at questions like, do they have current government projects which are ongoing? What is the percentage of funding which has come in from the government in the past? And very interestingly, so leverage and how much can you leverage is a very important part, especially in, as you have said, rural livelihood related grants, because there is government funding towards that. We're also then looking at issues like urban poverty and urban livelihoods, where policy design is now happening. So there we would be more into model creation, and then that linkage can happen tomorrow. What we're also looking at is that, there are some of the partners who have certain designs, and whether government funding comes in actively or not, our partners are then on the board or on the advisory committees. So across the board, whether it is on issues related to livelihoods or related to skills or related to citywide planning, we have some partners who are there with us here in this room itself, who are now playing that role and who are, taking the agenda forward, not necessarily through funding or projects, but actually going into the policy design space. So.
Fantastic, great. Thank you for that. I think we have time for another couple of questions. Let's get one up front over here. If we can have a mic up front.
Hi, I'm Lynn Smitham from the Kiowa Trust. I've heard it say from people in the development sector that the aggressive pushing for results in a very sort of quantitative way is what drives corporates, but it isn't the same in foundations. So my question is, culturally, how difficult will it be for people who are coming from organizations, corporate organizations, to move into CSR jobs where they're going to be partnering with NGOs, and whether actually it is a different culture?
For the entire panel, or would you like to address that to anyone in specific?
Whoever would like to answer it,
yeah.
thank you.
I think you are best. What was the question?
What was the question?
I couldn't get it.
So the question was around, there seems to be, people discussing in the room and outside that there is a difference in the culture, perhaps, with which corporates and maybe foundations go about their grant making. And on one end, you might have corporates perhaps pushing for results a lot more, being more result oriented. and with foundations, it may not be quite the same. So as corporates now move into being sort of more funders, how do you see that actually being translated? If that, yeah, would you like, did that actually capture it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I think as someone who's gone through the journey yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
See, it all depends on the leadership. Why did Axis Bank start a foundation? It was a feeling that the organization has grown. It's now a mid-sized bank. It's now time for us to return to society a little bit of what we earned from that. And so we started a foundation, and we were given the freedom to do what we wanted. We were just told that you work in the field of education. Never were we told that you have to reach out to this many organizations. This is the transformation that you will have to bring about. No. But then we found that once we started doing it, we found that this is really bringing in a lot of good to the organization. The employees are feeling good about what we are doing. Then we started our payroll program. We said that if you could contribute something from your salary every month to the organization, we could do more. And today in Axis Bank, 8,000 of our officers contribute every month to the Axis Bank Foundation. We collect close to around 16 lakh rupees every month just by way of payroll contributions. So now we have programs that run exclusively on officer contribution. And we go around talking to people and telling them what we do. So it gives us a great feeling. The officers feel, wow, it's great to work in this organization. So it's the culture. As far as pushing us for targets, no. They have given us one big target. The bank has said that you should create 1 million sustainable livelihoods by 2017. But are they going to decide my KPI based on that? Not at all. That's something that you should aspire for, and you should have a goal when you work towards something. So that's it. So I don't think we are pushed to do what we are doing. It is something that the organization as a whole feels that it's very important. And having started doing this work, we feel that it really brings great value. The employees feel good about it. When we talk to our customers, they too feel good about it. And the management also feels great that this is what we are doing.
Great, thank you so much. I think we've been given the stop sign, and so before we actually end and thank our eminent panel here, just a couple of closing notes, I guess. We have a lot of corporates here in this room, and the corporate sector in India has clearly been, in many ways over the last decade or two, a driving force for economic growth, right? And there are many things that they've done right and figured out, the strategic focus and then executed on that as well. And I think here we're talking about an opportunity, for reflection and to bring a lot of those learnings that they've already proven, right, on the business side of things, into what we're calling grant making over here. And what we're hearing from the experts, from those who've been doing it very successfully, is that it is important to start with a clear strategic focus. Think about the programs that matter. Think about what kind of impact that you want to start creating. And then do serious diligence. And there's no shortcut to that actually. Have strong boards on the organizations that have a voice in organization selection. Go out there into the field, meet these organizations, do a tiered diligence process. Evaluate their systems and processes. Evaluate how well they engage with the government, want to engage with the government to actually achieve scale. And I think with that, we will call it to a close. And so thank you all very much, and we hope you have enjoyed the panel.